Ms. Mariam Jaafar.
Mr. Speaker, it has been 10 years since paternity leave was introduced in Singapore, during which time paternity leave has gone from 1 to 2 weeks, shared parental leave from 1 to 4 weeks, and take-up by fathers has gone up to 55%. More recently, amendments were introduced to avail benefits to birth, adoptive, and stillborn parents in different employment situations. 10 years is a good time to take stock and see how the policy can be improved upon. The experience of other developed countries suggests that prioritizing paternity leave has a positive impact on parents, caregivers, their employers, and most importantly, the children. And one of the most notable examples of this is Iceland, where parents now get 12 months of leave, 6 months for each parent, with 6 weeks of that being transferable. That shift that started in the year 2000, when paternity leave was increased from 2 weeks to 3 months, was rapid. And today, more than 90% of parents take paternity leave. It is normal and socially expected to see men out pushing their babies in the pram, and the research shows that men are experiencing the role as a father much more strongly and in a more positive way. For instance, being around for their baby's first steps or first words. Importantly, these early bonds are sustained. WHO research shows that Icelandic daddies enjoy the strongest position as fathers in the world, with children finding it easy to go to daddy whenever they have a problem. The statistics also show that it has reduced the gender pay gap, as mothers are able to return to work and normal working hours sooner because childcare is more equally divided between both parents. We are some ways from this in Singapore, where women still take on much more childcare responsibilities, even when working full-time. But if we want greater equality of opportunity for women, we need to provide greater equality for men at home. I repeat, if we want greater equality of opportunity for women, we need to provide greater equality for men at home. And so, Mr. Speaker, while the increase in paternity leave from 2 to 4 weeks, including for self-employed workers, is a step in the right direction, one wonders, is it bold enough? Is it a missed opportunity to signal the will to take firm steps by making the shift voluntary rather than mandatory? Is it a missed opportunity to signal an intent to work towards narrowing or closing the gap between maternity and paternity leave, even if a practical approach is taken in implementation? Many multinational companies already provide significantly longer paternity leave than the current 2-week requirement, some equal to maternity leave, and with no tenure requirement. These companies see a generational shift in the workforce. Paternity leave is part of their strategy to attract, engage, and retain talent. And in doing so, they have also had to be more intentional in rolling out supporting measures like flexible work arrangements, in line with the direction of travel that we have already set out on. More companies should be made to see this as a first step by making it mandatory or at least committing to a timeline in the not-too-distant future, rather than the current wait-and-see stance, and by kickstarting a conversation about the importance of parental leave equality in promoting shared care. At this point, I would like to ask a clarification of the Minister. What are the markers that would signal that we are ready to move from voluntary to a mandatory increase in paternity leave? Moving to the increase in unpaid infant care leave from 6 days to 12 days, on paper, sounds good. But what is the current take-up rate of unpaid infant care leave today? In a recent response to a PQ from Mr. Lewis Ng, the Minister of Manpower said that the ministry does not track the utilization of unpaid infant care leave. So we are left with anecdotes. And the anecdotes suggest that above and beyond the subtle pressures that discourage fathers from using paternity leave, many fathers experience sometimes not so subtle pressures when it comes to taking unpaid infant care leave, even if they are willing to forego the pay. I have heard anecdotes from my Woodlands residents that taking any form of unpaid leave leads to automatic zero bonus, that unpaid leave can only be taken when paid leave is exhausted, that shift workers are not allowed to take unpaid leave, and so on. So for this laudable move to not turn cynical, it is important that the use of paternity and unpaid infant care leave is enshrined in the proposed anti-discrimination legislations. I would also like to ask a clarification to the Minister if the use of unpaid infant care leave will be tracked going forward. I would like to devote the remainder of my speech to something that has been asked many times in this House, but has been left out of the current bill: increasing childcare leave from the current 6 days per year for families with 2 or more children. For many, 6 days is simply not enough. These are the real life stories of my Woodlands residents, like Mr. E, who has 4 children, aged 1, 3, 5, and 8, who works 12-hour shifts at a manufacturing plant. His wife works from 9 to 5, so they're lucky to have their children in infant care and childcare at PCF facultats, so she can drop them off and pick them up after school. But every once in a while, one of the children will come back from school sick, and when one child gets sick, it is an inevitability that it gets passed on to one or more of the other children. And suddenly they are faced with having to keep the kids at home for 3, 4, 5 days a week. This happens 3 to 4 times a year. And we know that one bout of HFMD means 7 days of MC for the child. Since 6 days of their childcare leave are already used on the 6 days that the center closes, they end up using a fair chunk of their annual leave when their children are sick. Mr. K is a private hire driver with 4 children, aged 9, 12, 13, and 15. His 9-year-old is a special needs child. His wife is a homemaker, caring for the children, and her mother, who is a stroke patient. Each morning, he drives his children to 4 different schools before starting to accept jobs, even though this means that he misses out on some of the most lucrative driving slots. Sometimes he gets calls from the school to pick up his daughter when she is sick, or from his wife to bring her mother to her medical appointment, or his daughter to her developmental assessments, which further reduce his driving hours. He sometimes thinks about going back into the IT sector, which will likely give him better career development prospects, but he feels he needs the flexibility that being a private hire driver gives him, just given his family circumstances. And Madam S, a single mother with 2 children, aged 8 and 17, who works in the healthcare sector. Each weekday morning, Madam S sees her daughter off to school and then goes to work secure with the knowledge that her mother will be there to watch her daughter when she is back from school at around 2 p.m. But her mother recently suffered a stroke and is now in a nursing home. And so now when her younger daughter gets out of school, she relies on the combination of friends, neighbors, and her siblings' care to watch over her until her shift ends at 9 p.m. And given that a 17-year-old often has other plans, that often means leaving the 8-year-old child alone for several hours in a day. As a single mother, there are only 2 days of childcare leave available for her when her daughter falls ill. Mr. Speaker, Mr. E, Mr. K, Madam S, they're not outliers. Their stories demonstrate the increasingly varied circumstances and complex challenges working parents face and the trade-offs that they make on a daily basis to care for their children, including when they get sick. Each of them must weave together a different patchwork of solutions, often based on family-specific factors such as income, the number and age of their children, along with the availability of grandparents, relatives, neighbors, domestic helpers, and on the nature of their work and workplace dynamics. The government has stated that one of its key priorities is to ensure that parents have access to quality and affordable childcare and for their parents, and is increasing the number of childcare spaces. But the cost of childcare is still cited as a reason for couples to delay or forego children. And what happens when the child falls sick? For many parents, there's no alternative or safe space to take their child when he or she needs to be taken out of childcare for the day. Grandparents may be too old, live a distance far away, or deceased, while living the care of a sick child to a helper may not be a solution they feel comfortable with. And indeed, some young parents find the mere suggestion of these solutions to be quite triggering. Fortunately, there are increasing numbers of progressive companies that have implemented family-friendly practices, childcare leave, flexible work arrangements, and more broadly, a supportive workplace culture. In the public service, there are ministries that grant 6 days of childcare leave below 12 years old, capped to a maximum of 10 days. I believe NTUC grants 5 days of childcare leave per child, capped at 15 days. Yet the government has been slow to move to legislate further enhancements to childcare leave, citing a need to strike a balance in addressing the caregiving needs of parents and the manpower and operational needs of employers. This is especially so for small and medium enterprises, some of which may still be grappling with the effects of the pandemic. There is concern that mandating more childcare leave might affect employability. Now, these concerns are not unwarranted. It's not uncommon to hear managers and co-workers, especially singles or parents with no children, singles or adults with no children, expressing annoyance or frustration with having to cover for colleagues who go on childcare leave at short notice. Singles or adults with no children often complain that they often end up caring for their elderly parents while their siblings with children excuse themselves, with even less support for parental care leave and financial support. And on the flip side, some parents with sick children who have to take more days speak of feeling resigned to what they see as retribution in their performance appraisals and bonuses, particularly if they have ambitious single bosses or older bosses who have forgotten what it is like to have a young family. Mr. Speaker, clearly it is not just a matter of legislation or guidelines on flexible work arrangements. Fundamentally, we must all have more empathy for others, more respect for all. This cannot simply be a campaign slogan for one, but a movement for all. And we must work, government and citizens, to make it happen. But there are things we can do in the nearer term. The government has committed significant funding to making a Singapore made for families, from higher baby bonuses, contributions to CDAs, and the proposed increase in paternity and unpaid infant leave. At the same time, a slew of initiatives are underway to support women's development, especially towards women at the workforce and in the community. There is also growing focus on our aging population, on single mothers, on special needs children. In 2024, new TAFEP guidelines for flexible work arrangements will be released. Meanwhile, even with the scepter of a recession, some sectors are still struggling to get enough manpower, including high-demand sectors like healthcare and education, which also hire more women. The stars, therefore, seem to be aligned for stakeholders to act on the importance of sufficient childcare leave. Given these, I urge the government to consider two further enhancements today. First, legislating more childcare leave for parents with 2 or more children. There seem to be enough parents across a range of family and work circumstances for whom an additional 2 days per child would make a material difference, and enough evidence that improved benefits drive employee engagement and business results. The total number of days can be capped, say at 10 days, but recognizing the increased childcare burden with more children can be really important to drive consistency with a policy of encouraging 2 or more children. Second, taking an industry-specific lens to enhancing childcare and childcare leave and driving customized solutions for each industry in partnership with employers and unions. Working parents face different constraints and preferences for key aspects of childcare, such as the type of care, location, and hours. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. This calls for a more de-average approach that pays attention to the difference in caregiver experiences, looks for gaps in care specific to each industry, and develops customized solutions that better meet these employees' needs. For example, transportation and warehousing workers often require care starting as early as 4 a.m., while IT and retail workers may need more flexibility for later pickups. In high-demand sectors like healthcare and education, the need to attract and retain employees and the high proportion of employees in the public sector afford the opportunity to drag along the rest of the industry in granting more childcare leave. Just as we have industry transformation maps that drive skills, that drive productivity solutions and workforce development at the sector level, the transformation to more family-friendly environments can be driven at the sector level. Mr. Speaker, making a Singapore made for families is one of the most pressing challenges of our time. Our approach must be to give all families, parents and children, more help, whatever their choices and ambitions, and around increasingly varied needs. We have made progressive enhancements to providing this support and choice while maintaining our pro-business stance. But we need to go further and faster. I am confident we can continue to find innovative solutions to this. Notwithstanding my suggestions for further enhancements and clarifications, I support the amendments in this bill. Thank you.